A month had passed since Harry's funeral. Deborah crouched in front of her husband's grave, placing a modest bouquet of flowers, stroking the native face in the photograph. Harry was gone a month ago. The cemetery was full of people who had come to see the man of his lost journey. Friends, acquaintances, neighbors, colleagues. Deborah had been happily married to her husband for 20 years. He taught at the university, and she worked as a nurse in an ordinary city hospital. That's where they met many years ago. The young man had undergone surgery to remove an appendix. The Deborah was the first person Harry saw after the operation. "How are you feeling?" the girl in the nurse's uniform asked, looking at the patient with bright, kind eyes. Harry was as handsome as God. He had always been popular with the girls, often rewarding them with meaningless affairs. Strong, with a beautifully palmed-up body, black hair and brown eyes. The young man changed girlfriends like loaves, and now he was lying helplessly in a hospital bed, feeling awkward in front of a frail, pretty young nurse. Harry tried to get up, but Deborah stopped him. "Lie down, you can get up yet, but I have to ask you out," Harry joked in his usual manner, which brought a smile to the nurse's face. "I don't mind. I just have to get your doctor's permission," Deborah replied. In the evening, Harry expressed a desire for some fresh air. He gave the nurse such a pleading look that she couldn't refuse and help him from the bed to the wheelchair. Deborah took the patient out into the garden herself. For an hour, they talked about nothing, Harry joking a lot, sometimes wincing at the pain of the stitches that had not yet healed. The patient was improving repeatedly. The day Harry left the hospital, Deborah had the day off. The young man had become so accustomed by this girl with bright eyes and a gentle smile that he deliberately procrastinated, waiting for her to appear in the hospital room. He really was waiting for her at the hospital entrance with a bouquet of flowers. He looked anxiously for the familiar frail figure, hoping to find her in the garden where they had walked when he was a patient at the clinic. "Is it you?" Harry heard a familiar voice and turned. Deborah was standing before him. "Do you need help?" "No." The young man hesitated for some reason. "I came to ask you out." Unexpectedly, the girl smiled and took the bouquet from Harry's hands. It was an ordinary summer's day, unmarkable to most people who passed the couple of the street. But to Deborah and Harry, it was special. Later, when they were married, they celebrated the date of their first date every day. Her husband was sure to give her flowers, and then just like the first time, they walked down the street and dined in a cozy little restaurant. Even after the wedding, the romance in their relationship did not disappear. The spouses almost never quarreled, although Deborah had plenty of reasons to create a scandal, or at least show dissatisfaction. The handsome, confident economics teacher could not help but attract the attention of young students. Harry had no shortage of admirers. Some of them often called home, and when Deborah picked up the phone, they breathed excitedly without saying anything. It was going beyond the bounds of decency. "If girls who are in love with you all call home, I'd like to think that they do in your lectures," Deborah once told her husband. "Oh, come on. Do you have to pay attention to them?" He waved her husband away. "You know that I really only love you." Still, sometimes Deborah had a bad feeling. When Harry was late for class, the woman's imagination will treacherously paint pictures that made Deborah jealous. What if he was some young student? She thought at such moments. She thought at such moments, but immediately drove the bad thoughts away. And in half an hour her husband appeared on the doorstep. Deborah trusted Harry again unconditionally, forgetting the silly thoughts of his betrayal. The only thing that clouded their happiness was that they could not have a child. The feeling of unspent maternal tenderness gave Deborah no rest. She dreamed of the sound of children's voices in their big house, but pregnancy did not come. "Darling, let's take an orphan from the orphanage and raise him as our own," her wife said one day. "That's out of question, darling. I'm not ready to raise someone else's child without knowing that its parents were like. It's a big responsibility, and I could never love him the way a mother and father love their own baby." Harry frowned. Deborah broached the subject of adoption several more times, but Harry was adamant. "No, no, and no," he told his wife. And in time, Deborah came to terms with the idea that they will never have children. One day, Harry will realize that he needs a son. "What if he leaves me and goes away?" Deborah was afraid of the woman and tried every day to surround her husband with more and more care, giving him romantic evenings and planning interesting trips together. Everything was going in their family life, and now Harry is not at her side. He died a few months later, literally burned to death in front of his wife from a terrible disease. Deborah blamed herself. A doctor by profession, she had always watched over her own and her husband's health. She took Harry to regular doctor's appointments, and her husband had regular checkups. But the disease was getting stronger. A thriving, strong man, only in his 5th decade, turned into a helpless, sick old man in just a few weeks. Thinking of all that had happened to her beloved husband, Deborah returned home from the cemetery. Now she often went to her husband's grave, talked to him, and searched for answers to her questions. The most important of which was, why did God take away our happiness? Deborah didn't want to go home. She walked around the faces, not noticing that it was drizzling and that the sun, which had promised a good day since the morning, was hidden behind the clouds. The raindrops that fell on Deborah's face, like tears and bitterness at the loss of a loved one, brought the window back to reality. She didn't even notice herself as she arrived at her and Harry's big house. Deborah sighed. That evening she woke sink back into loneliness, remembering the happy years of her life with her husband. Suddenly, the woman heard a faint squeak, as if a small kitten was meowing somewhere in the yard. She walked along the path and looking under the bushes, but could find the animal, thinking she had imagined it. Deborah pulled her front door keys out of her purse and entered the house. "What's that?" The hostess stopped in front of the porch where the basket stood. She bent down to examine what was inside, and immediately recalled in horror. In the basket was a baby. From the pink suit and bonnet, the woman could tell it was a newborn baby girl. Grabbing the basket and the baby, Deborah rushed into the house. Where did this baby come from? She thought as she reached for the baby. As she felt the woman's hands on her, the girl began to cry and demand to be fed. Wow, she's so loud. She wants to eat, but I'm going to feed her. Deborah took the girl in her arms and tried to calm her down, rocking her from side to side. The baby was tiny, about 2 or 3 weeks old. With the girl in her arms, Deborah opened the refrigerator. It was empty. In mourning for her dead husband, the widow ate almost nothing and didn't bother to replenish her food supply. Unable to think of anything better to do, the woman called a neighbor. "Aunt Emma?" An excited Deborah said into the receiver. "I've had an emergency. Could I come over?" Emma, the elderly neighbor, had visited the couple many times when Harry was alive, and had often invited them over. She had lived across the street a long time ago, and remembered Harry's parents and Harry's when he was a young man. Emma had been one of the first people Deborah had met when she had married Harry. The woman sometimes helped her young wife in a neighborly way, and as she grew older and Emma became ill, Deborah will visit her, bringing her medicine and taking her blood pressure. "Of course, Deborah," Emma replied. "But what's wrong? You're so scaring me." "I will explain everything. Do you have any milk?" Deborah thought she should fill the baby and then think about what to do next. A few minutes later, Emma, intrigued by the widow's unexpected call, knocking on the door. She was holding a bottle of milk in her hand. "Here it is, just as you asked," the old woman said. "I bought it this morning." She took off her cloak and entered the room. "Deborah, where did you get the baby?" she asked in surprise when she saw the baby on the sofa in the living room. "You won't believe this, Aunt Emma. I found this little girl on my doorstep today. Someone dropped her off in a regular basket. No clothes, no bottle, and she was hungry. I shuddered to think what will have happened to the poor thing if I'd been too late." "What a horror," said the woman with a splash of her hands. "We must report this to the police at once. What if the girl has been stolen?" "Let's feed her first. I don't know how long she's been on our porch, but she's hungry." Deborah went into the kitchen to microwave some milk. As a medical professional, she knew the baby needed formula, but then was no time to run the store. "Deborah, come quickly," Aunt Emma called. As Deborah entered the living room with a bowl of warm milk and a small spoon to feed the baby, she saw Emma looking at something in the basket. "There is something in there," she pointed. The lady of the house looked inside. On the diaper that lined the bottom of the basket, she found an envelope. The women looked at each other in surprise, but just then the baby cried for food. Deborah rushed to the baby, laid her on a large pillow, and began to feed her milk with a spoon. Emma waited patiently for Deborah to finish feeding the baby. When the baby was full, she calmed down. "Deborah, are you going to see what is in this envelope?" the neighbor asked impatiently. They sat down on the sofa together and printed out the message. "Hello, Father. I've been looking for you for years, just to look into your eyes and understand why my life turned out the way it did. If only you knew what I went through living in an orphanage for abandoned children. But I grew up and every day all I could think about was finding you. I never know the warmth of a mother's arms or the love of a father, and I blame you for that, not my mother. Now that I'm a mother, I don't want my daughter to go through what I went through. Take care of her. Do your duty to me and to your granddaughter, your daughter Mary." What they had read in the letter shocked Deborah, but it hardly surprised Emma. It was just that the neighbor had never thought that the time would come to have a frank conversation with Harry's wife about the event of the past. "It was about 25 years ago," the neighbor began. "I was planting primroses in my front yard when I heard screams. Harry's mother was standing at the gate, and in front of her was a girl with a crying face. I didn't immediately know what they were talking about, and I didn't immediately realize that the girl was pregnant. Her belly was already quite big." "Get out of here, you bastard," Harry's mother yelled at her. "Our son will never marry you. We didn't give him everything, money, education, a good home, to bring a dishwasher's daughter into the family. Get out." The woman pushed the pregnant girl outside and slammed the gate. The girl walked down the street. An hour later, Emma went to the bakery to buy fresh bread. She immediately noticed a girl in bench outside the shop. The pregnant woman was breathing in pain. "What's wrong?" Emma ran up to her. "I'm in labor," she moaned. The woman ran into the store and called for an ambulance. "I don't know why I went to the hospital with that strange girl." Emma shook her head as she told Deborah a story from the past. "She gave birth to a baby girl very quickly. The next day I felt uneasy, so I decided to go to the hospital to see how the young mother and her daughter were doing. I even remember taking some treats with me. The girl's name was Pamela. She and Harry were madly in love and wanted to be together forever. But unlike the boy, the girl didn't have wealthy parents or decent education. She came from a very poor family. This became the only obstacle to their happiness. Deciding to separate the lovers, Harry's parents sent their son to study in another state, and the girl threatened that they will destroy her if they saw her again near their house or near Harry. Soon, Harry's girlfriend realized she was pregnant, but couldn't find her boyfriend. She named the baby girl Mary. I learned this a few days later when I went back to the hospital to visit the unfortunate woman. Her story really stayed with me, Emma continued. But they told me that she had left the baby and gone away. Where to? No one knew. And then what happened, Aunt Emma? Deborah asked, watching the sleeping, well-fed baby smile in her sleep. I don't know. But apparently, Harry found out how cruel his parents had been to his girlfriend. All over the house that he will never have children again. I swear you will never have any grandchildren because of your wickedness. Our lineage will be broken by me, Harry swore. He was going to punish his mother and father by denying them the chance to become grandparents. Deborah thought, scowling. It turned out that her husband hadn't just treated in her parents by getting angry with them. What if his and Deborah's lack of children was a coincidence of his woe when he was young? If this little girl was Harry's granddaughter, could he have children and just cheated on Deborah all her life? Goosebumps ran down the widow's skin. The questions that arose in her mind, Harry will never be able to answer again. When the neighbor left, a plan matured in Deborah's mind. She decided to keep the baby. A few days later, she asked Emma to take care of the baby and went to the hospital where she had once worked as a nurse. The head doctor greeted her with joy. I'm sorry for your loss, Deborah, he said. If you need my help, don't hesitate to ask. I do, the woman said firmly, telling the doctor the story of the baby she had found. I'm asking you to help me take the paperwork like I give birth to her. I need to get a birth certificate to make a birth record. Deborah, that's malpractice. The doctor shook his head. I'm begging you, the woman pleaded. I have money. I will pay whatever you need. After some consideration, the doctor agreed. When she had calmed down, Deborah went to see her and her late husband's family doctor. She needed to find out if her husband could have had children. Her worst suspicions was confirmed. As a young man, Harry had undergone surgery to remove his ejaculatory ducts, leaving him sterile for life. That means he can't have children, the doctor said, pulling out a thick folder and showing Deborah the voluntary contest her husband had given for the operation more than 20 years earlier. The woman was in shock. Harry saw how she had dreamed of having children, how she had prayed to God, undergone tests, even take some drugs, how heartless and cruel he must have been to watch his wife's agony in silence, to hide from Deborah the only and main reason for the lack of children in the family. Now, everything was clear to her. On her way home, the widow stopped at the cemetery. I didn't know you at all, Harry, Deborah said quietly, looking at her husband's photo. And all my life with you, I've believed every word you said, loved and respected you unconditionally. Deborah's eyes filled with tears. The woman took a handkerchief from her purse and wiped the moisture from her eyelashes. Tell me why I was a bargaining chip for your parents' sins. Come on, answer me. She started into his calm, confident eyes and found no answer. Your foolish vow, made in a heart of wrath, robbed me of the happiness of motherhood. By punishing your parents for separating you from your beloved, you punished me for life. Was it my fault that your mother threw out the pregnant girl? You did a despicable thing to me, Harry. Deborah turned and walked quickly down the path toward the cemetery exit. She decided that now she could give her love to the little girl. Deborah would raise her as her own daughter, and perhaps one day tell her the secret of her appearance. She was certain of the rightness of her decision. They say that when someone dies in a family and a child is born in the same year, it is the Lord who blessed the newborn, she thought, and she returned home, where little Gabrielle was waiting for the woman.